Hello again and welcome to Clash Course. My name is Joey Livingston and my host here with me as always is Greg Brahe. How are you doing, Greg?
I'm wonderful. Excited to do this show this week. Last week we didn't get the opportunity.
Yeah, and now I've lost my place. We need a swanky tagline like Christopher Mowdy has for his show. Have you heard his tagline?
What's his tag? I've watched the show, but I don't know.
I don't remember what it is, but it sounds pretty cool when he says it. And we don't have one.
Good story.
Yeah.
You came to that about as prepared as I ever come to a show.
True.
On that note, I'm actually prepared this time. I have our Epicurus quote up here that I'm hoping that we can resolve today, because we've been on this issue for a while, and I really would like to spend some time destroying another issue in your brain.
Yeah, I think it's still interesting though, so I'm happy to continue it.
I pulled it up. It's right here. Would you like me to introduce it quickly?
Yeah, just read it real quick and then let's just go back to the third line.
So the quote we've been focusing very strongly on the third line of it, but is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? And is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God?
Okay, so it was the second line that we were focusing on.
It's is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent.
Right.
That's the one that we've been
right.
focusing
Okay,
on.
so you came prepared. What now? When you say you came prepared, are you
That was
referencing
my
the last show?
Right there.
Are you
I actually
referencing
had that pulled up in front of me.
You're saying you weren't prepared the last show? Is that?
Well, I'm saying that this time, because usually I'm like, hold on, I don't have the quote in front of me. I need to Google it quick here, and this time I did, so it was ready.
Oh,
aside from that, the only preparation that
I
needed
okay, that's what you mean. You Googled it.
My brain.
You Googled. You had okay. Because last show, I told you that I was going to let you have the last word, and then your last word was so silly that I decided to tell you that you were accusing God of being a book burner. Or you were saying you were saying that he needed to be a book burner in order to not be malevolent.
Well, at the end of the last show, what we discussed was the different ways that God could prevent evil from happening. Was what we were discussing, and one of the options I said was simply stop evil thoughts from ever entering our brains.
Right.
But
which is the equivalent of spiritual.
What we ended up doing there was sort of going down a very specific rabbit hole, and not just. I made a mistake in not just sticking with the fact if God is omnipotent and omniscient and knows everything and can do everything, I'm sure that God can find a way to make this happen.
So we're not going to explore how he would do so.
Well, I think there's plenty of other options, but I think there's a default there in that if it's possible in any way and God chooses not to, then we still are left with this, is he able but not willing?
Okay.
So
you are kind of, by saying, if he's omnipotent and omniscient, he can find a way. You're saying, number one, I'm not going to put myself in his place, which to me is the exercise that you need to do to determine if he is malevolent by being able but not willing. And secondly, it also kind of sounds like you're kind of going back to the craziness that you said last episode, where God didn't have to be, he didn't have to follow the rules of logic, and because that to me that would be the only way where it would be impossible for us to explore how he might do so, is to say, well, the way he would do it would be beyond our ability to comprehend.
I'm not saying that the way he would do it would be beyond our ability to comprehend. I'm just saying that the way he would do it is not necessarily something that we can think of given the information that we currently have.
So then I would accuse you of saying that just solely to win the argument, because
do you concede that wins the argument? Is that
well? I think it's an escape, for sure.
You might be right, and that's I guess I did want to say that there's more to it than that. But the reason that I brought that up is because I wanted to go into
now. See, I don't mind you dangling me
objections.
out. Just for the record, I don't mind you dangling me a little bit, because you always give me a hard time about doing that to you. and I don't have any problem with you giving me a tease and leading me on a little bit. I'm fine with that. And I even I find myself getting a little excited, actually.
All right. Well, it makes me uncomfortable that you'd say that, but okay. I think you should focus a bit more for this one on why you think that evil ever has a justified purpose. We talked a bit about how we define evil and pain,
Right?
And I think that the point that you were really trying to get at was the learning experience. Was
Right.
at least one of them, right? That we learn and we
Right.
grow from experiencing hardships.
I have to tell you that it's difficult to make the argument because you won't allow me to define evil as all which is harmful, and I don't mind you not allowing me to do that. It's kind of a challenge when you don't allow me to do it because I get to fight for it, and I think that the fight is worth having because as I've stated time and time again, if you don't define all that is harmful as some gray shade of evil, then you must decide for yourself where to draw the line.
And again, I think that without going entirely back into that one, when we discussed the issue of evil, I did not have a problem admitting a gradient of evils or of harm and bad, but I'm specifically thinking that the application this particular argument works best on, and as long as it still exists,
Works best for who? Works best
it
for
works
who?
best to make the point. The argument itself.
Let me restate that. Works best for whom? Just
For
getting the
me.
grammar Nazis off of me there. Sorry.
It's all right. What I'm saying is that the argument itself is trying to make a point. It's trying to make the point that either God is not omnipotent, he is or malevolent, or evil should not exist, or he should not be called God. Those are the four. Yeah, the four
Yes.
possible conclusions that Epicurus
it's my
is trying to
contention.
make. So this particular one,
it's my contention that the person who wrote that, at least the person who wrote it in English, as we have already pointed out, we can't propose to know what the original writer in the original language meant. We are only discussing what we believe the English version means to most people, and what I think that the person who translated it, and what I think that most people take from this when they think of evil, is they are more in line with what you're saying. That yes, there's that there are shades of evil, but that it's a confined gradient. In other words, not all that is harmful is evil. The line starts somewhere, and then the shade of gray begins all the way to black.
I would even argue it in sort of the opposite, that there's the shade of gray up to the line, and from that point, the line is evil. But even within that, you're right. There is still a gradient. There's things, I guess no matter what level of evil
whether
you
you
can
say
think
there's
of,
a gradient or
that we can
not,
make it
you
more
are
evil.
still arguing that there's a line somewhere in the degrees of harm and intention at which evil begins. And I think that most people would agree with you. I'm not arguing that. I would for instance, one time that Mountie fella accused me of being what was the term he used? Idiosyncratic. Is that
Yes.
the term that he used? And I haven't looked it up in the dictionary yet. But what he explained it meant.
I think that your offense would really be diminished if you did look that word up. But
Yeah. Well, it was the tone he used.
oh, sure.
And what he explained it meant was that I was using a very narrow definition that was not common. And in that case, I did not agree with him. But in this case, I would say I'm being a little idiosyncratic, but I think it's justified because I think I can argue with the world that they are not really thinking through the issue of evil.
But I think that what you're trying to do is to make us consider the entire scope of evil and say, well, there's some evil that certainly does serve a purpose. And I think that this particular argument that if evil exists and God is able to stop it but not willing, we only need a single case of evil that has no benefit to make that point, because we can still say, well, then why didn't God stop it? That's where it's sort of the single exception that disproves the rule.
I believe
why we can focus on after
I believe,
the most evil act
and
ever.
I think we're going around in circles here, but I don't think you can give me a single example of evil that had no infinitesimally small amount of benefit to it.
Well, and that's where I am bringing up the net benefit, but I did want to go more into that one. So let's go into the benefits, the positive benefits of evil. And that's the rabbit hole that I was going to let you run down a bit this week and see where we can go with that one. I would like you to make that
Suddenly
argument.
I feel like I'm leashed.
There's not a single evil action that does not have a benefit, right? That's your claim?
Yes.
No matter how evil?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what the benefit is to genocide?
Yes. Was that an evil laugh? Was that a cackle? Oh, sorry. Okay, so the benefits of genocide. Well, first of all, let's negate all the things that are not a benefit. It is not of benefit to the human beings who got killed, and I would not consider it a benefit that which the killers wanted to gain from it. I wouldn't consider any of those a benefit, although the killer certainly did consider it a benefit from his perspective. But in my opinion, the benefit that comes out of genocide is that people think about it. They think hard and long about it. Why would somebody do this? And what, as you are asking, what possible benefit could come from this? And they learn how atrocious it is and how horrible it is. And we breed out of that a society that gets larger and larger, where every single individual is not just opposed to genocide because it's against the law, but because they strongly believe in their spirit that it is wrong. And we are not there yet. There are still lots of people that believe in genocide. And they will either be talked out of it, or they will die of old age, or one of the crazy ones will do it again.
I don't disagree with you on really any of that.
Do what?
I don't disagree with you on really any of that.
So
that certainly is a benefit of genocide.
Yes.
But my question then is, again, coming from the perspective of an omnipotent God, if that's the only reason that you're allowing this genocide to happen, wouldn't it be more efficacious or maybe just efficient or kinder and less malevolent to simply give us that knowledge, say in form of a tree in a garden?
Well, you are asking me to go down a mythological trail here, and I don't believe in that
I'm
story.
asking you to go down a logical trail and this is actually related to the presuppositionalist argument in saying that if some God is omnipotent, this God by definition is capable of simply imparting absolute knowledge upon us and still then allowing us to make choices using that knowledge. It's not violating our free will for us to simply know things innately. And one of the things that we could know innately is that genocide is wrong. It's evil. Okay,
so let me say in response to that I think there are some things to argue there about why that wouldn't make sense, and we can spend some time talking about that. But before we do, and before we decide whether to, I want to point out that it's clear to you and me both, and follow me for a moment here, that if there is a God, he did not do that.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm hopping a little bit between reality and this this logical game that we're playing. I'm not wanting to, personally, I'm not wanting to make up a fantasy world where everything is different. I'm wanting to imagine for a moment that in the world that we live, there is an omnipotent creator. And if we assume that, although we cannot prove it, then we must conclude that he did not do that. And then instead of saying why can't he, I think the better question is number one, why didn't he? But more importantly, how is he just in what he has done?
That, I think, is actually the crux of this particular argument. Even I think that saying is he able but not willing is making all of those assumptions that there is in fact an omnipotent creator that could have stopped us and stopped these things from happening and chose not to. Right. So the question is saying why and concluding, well,
but you're offering suggestions. You rather than analyzing what has happened and asking the question why, you are just offering constructive suggestions as to how we might do it better.
But that's I'd love to go down that route here, because it's the question is why would a creator, an omniscient creator, do such a thing if you could avoid it? And I think that it is a pretty logical conclusion, is that God is malevolent. And just for reference here, I know we've hitched upon that term malevolent again. The definition, I'm using that within, understanding it as, is having or showing a wish to do evil to others. That's the first definition that comes up when you type in define malevolent on the Google. So okay. I think it's a fair one.
And you accept that definition?
I will accept that definition for the purposes of this, at least. I think that's a perfectly fair definition of what we could certainly conclude that that's the case.
There's an easy out if you're going to accept that definition. That isn't really the definition that I was working with in my mind, and I'm not going to be so cheap as to claim victory here, but the cheap way out is to point out that God is not actually the one doing this evil. He is simply allowing it. He's simply allowing his creation to make these decisions.
But
by definition, he is not actually being malevolent.
He created it, and he's omniscient, and therefore knew it was going to happen.
He created a world of beings who have free will and free thought, and he has allowed them to remain that way, and that's pretty, in my mind, for a God to allow these people, his creation, to remain free-thinking and free-willed from beginning to end without burning ideas out of their mind or preventing them from reasoning things through or learning from anything at any point in time, is arguably pretty benevolent.
But we've established already that he is perfectly willing to limit our ability to do things. There's things that we cannot do. We can only see within a certain spectrum. We can only hear within a certain frequency range. We cannot fly without assistive devices. We cannot breathe underwater. There's plenty of things that humans are not capable of doing, but other animals are perfectly capable of doing.
Yet. We're not able to do these things yet. There's a lot of things that we at one time could not do that now we can. And this is a you're talking about.
You're making a bit of a post-humanist argument here.
Well, I'm saying that human beings as a species, whatever we are, have certainly evolved from being incapable of doing things to now being capable, and reason is certainly one of them. There was a time, there was a time when we couldn't see anything. We were not a species that had these sorts of senses. We couldn't see or hear. We evolved from life that didn't have these abilities.
Sure, and so did all kinds of other life. We are just one branch of that particular tree.
We're the first of these species on this planet to have evolved into the ability to reason with our minds in the way that we do, just as we are one of the first, at least, to be able to see in color. It is not that It is not that this theoretical God has permanently limited us from various things, but rather that he is allowing us to evolve as we do in every way, however that be.
And, I have to say that understanding the theory of evolution to the level that I do and understanding the diversity in life also
Don't speak down to me. Do not speak down to me.
Okay.
Just kidding.
It also supports my conclusion that there is not a loving and benevolent creator. I understand the process of evolution to be an incredibly horrifically cruel process with intense and overwhelming amounts of death, pain, and suffering, and it produces things like parasitic wasps and malaria. It produces horrible things by selection and random mutation. And I think that if there was a benevolent creator, then it certainly could come up with a better system than that as well. This is just another kind of evil.
So
we talk about genocide.
So you will...
but frankly, evolution is way crueler over the vast scope of
So you will
life on Earth.
propose to suggest a much better system than the complexities of evolution that we see before us, but you will leave it up to God to decide how to keep us from committing genocide without preventing our reason.
Oh, no, I offered some certainly plausible solutions, and I could do the same for evolution. But I'm saying that just because I may not come up with every possible solution or even the best possible solution doesn't mean that there isn't one.
Well, that's true. I agree with that. I agree that just because we can't imagine something that's better doesn't mean that there isn't something that's better. And I also would like to point out that in this entire conversation, we have perhaps been supposing that God is perfect, but that statement never said he was. It simply said that he knew everything and had all power.
That's true, but I think that then why I call him God at the end of this certainly would apply.
Yes, well, you know my definition of God.
Me?
Yes. We spent a long time going through it, and you got mad at me because of it. I begin at a very...
No. I meant that your definition of God is me, not me as in I know your definition.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But I begin with a very simple definition: conscious and willful creator. I choose to believe that we came from something conscious and intelligent. I never said he was perfect, but I also don't believe that whatever created this is evil or malevolent.
Well, I think that you're absolutely right that if we don't assume at least omniscience, the ability to know things before they happen and know every possible scenario, then you're right. Then God's just a kid with an ant farm and learning as he goes. He's throwing in a chocolate bar and seeing what happens.
What's wrong with that?
And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying that that's not really the understanding of God that most people...
am going to claim victory here because, number one, you knew going into this argument my definition of God. I didn't trick you in any way. And arriving at the conclusion that God is the spirit of a child exploring life and bringing it about. There's nothing bad about that. Mistakes might be made, but that doesn't mean that he's evil.
But you're still forgetting that final clause.
And he sure seems to have a lot of patience.
You've not really justified the reason that other people should call that God in that case. I mean, I'm certainly willing to accept your definition of what you consider a God to be, but I think that you then still need to consider the final clause.
If we came from something intelligent, If something intelligent and conscious created us, then what else could you call it? In the vocabulary that we have, what else could you call it?
Well, and creation is a unusual term, especially when we're considering the kid with an ant farm kind of an idea, because then are we just the product of an experiment? He didn't know what was going to happen, and we just came about. Then I would not really consider us to be a creation. That would be a byproduct of the creation, a consequence of the creation. But the creation would be the initial conditions that God set. Unless we are a special creation made specifically by this God with a specific purpose, then I don't think that it would be considered or relevant.
Two arguments back, when we began, you accepted my definition of God at its most in its most abstract form, in my opinion, which is conscious, willful, and the creator of us. You accepted that. We went forward, and then when I won that argument, you got mad at me because you were trying to insert a bunch of other stuff into it, to which I wasn't inserting. I was just observing the world around us and showing that possibly it met this definition. Secondly, going into this argument, you knew that I already adhered to that definition of at least conscious, willful, and our creator. So I'm saying, if we take this statement and we apply it to something that created us, that has a conscious and is intelligent, there are plenty of ways to imagine how he might not be malevolent.
But I believe at the conclusion of that, a few arguments back, I did very much so confront you with the question of why call it God, and I said that I don't. I mean, yes, okay, we've chosen the definition conscious and willful creator for this, and you've been able to determine that.
I'll make you a deal. I'll make you a deal. If you will give me line 2, we can talk about line 3.
That's actually line 4. But
I thought. See, when you read it, I thought we were mistaken, and that the malevolence line was actually line 2.
Yeah, there's is he both able and willing? Whence cometh evil? Is line 3, and then is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God?
So I am claiming victory on line 2. We can talk about line 4.
I will grant you a victory on that under your definition of God, but then question you with line 4.
Good.
Well,
right,
I did need to cover.
Let's do that. I like
line 4 more specifically, though, and saying neither able nor willing. Are you admitting that this God is incapable of doing that?
No.
Okay, then line 4 may not apply directly.
All right, I win. Show's over.
Because line 4 is saying if this God is neither able nor willing. So we would need to go
able
through line
and
3
willing.
that says if he is both able and willing, why evil?
He can be able and willing, and not be malevolent. He can be and be called God. He can be able and not willing, and not be malevolent. If you throw in the idea that he is perfect and doesn't make any mistakes, I'm not sure that that argument can't be made. But I'm not required to make it during this show.
So I think that you're looking at line 3 then. He is both able and willing. And then the question is, then why is there evil?
If he's both able and willing, then why is there evil? See, this whole statement assumes but never says. I mean, it's all somewhere under there. You can see that this person is assuming that God is perfect, but never makes that as part of this argument.
I don't know, because I'm frankly going to look at the origin of the quote to some extent.
Let me also point out that the idea of a perfect God is a very narrow idea of God, not just in my own definition, but there have been plenty of gods who are creators of this world in human history that are far from perfect.
Right, and that's where I'm actually going to in this one appeal to the original author. I know that that's not what our intention was, but in saying that the person who wrote this obviously thought it was a convincing argument and was writing it in Greece in somewhere between 340 and 270 BC, which was his lifespan, or BCE, if you, I don't care which way you want to call it. But that person would obviously be confronted with the Greek pantheon, and there's plenty of imperfection in that. I mean, Zeus was certainly imperfect, and I think that his argument still stands because that's the environment he was making it in, and saying, well, then why do we call him God?
Okay. Well, I can certainly understand if we try to get into this writer's mind and understand the time in which he wrote it and the gods to which he was referring. I can see how he would, in his grasp of what a god should be, might question the very godness of the gods to which he's talking to. I can grant that. I'm not a complete jerk, but I will claim that it's possible in theory. If we're just working with just models here, for something to be a creator of this universe, know everything about it, and have all the power within it, and evil exist, and yet that creator itself not be evil.
I'd really like to ask you how.
Well, I thought we just went through that.
Well, I mean, you just granted he has all of the knowledge in the universe as well.
Okay.
If
the intent of this creator was simply to, number one, create a universe in which life evolves, as you say, towards nothing, or as
it will is sort of the without
as
direction.
It will.
It just evolves as it will.
Fine. Yeah. Or as in my ignorant theist brain sometimes imagine that we're getting better and better. Either way, if a god creates one or the other, then it is just a exercise or an experiment, as you say. Where if this life evolves into free will and free choice and the ability to reason, and it was his intention for that to happen, then that was just his intention. If it was just as it will, as you say, and yet it did, then that was just his intention. He wasn't trying to create a world of immense suffering. He was just trying to create an evolution of life.
In this one, I certainly can grant that God that created with the intention of just letting it be and seeing what happens. Well, not even seeing what happens. A God that created with just the intention of creation and allowing creation to go as it will without direction is not necessarily malevolent. Even if that God had complete knowledge as to what would happen. Well, actually, that's a hitching point. I'm not going to grant that one quite yet. But a God that creates everything to just let it develop as it will is not necessarily malevolent from at least the human perspective to say, why would this God do this to us? And I think that, frankly, it's a bit of an arrogant question from the human perspective, if that is the actual intention. But we can certainly say that this God is apathetic to us in that respect. And it's not really that different to say, I mean, not necessarily malevolent, but certainly not loving and caring.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I think that there are all kinds of directions we could go in this discussion, but I think to some extent I've achieved my goal. But yet I have to grant many things that you have brought into the equation. I didn't. We weren't really trying to. You brought it back to trying to explore the author's original intent, and we kind of agreed at the beginning that we weren't going to do that, but yet at the same time, when you went there, it gave me pause to think. I can understand the question, why call him God, as a matter of protest.
Actually, bringing it back to the author's intent was just a matter of evidence in saying that obviously at some point in time, there was a person who believed in an imperfect God. And frankly, the Greek pantheon has imperfect gods, a large variety of them. And
if this is a statement of trying to bring this this entity off his throne, I can see it that way. But if it's a technical question, I don't agree with it.
I think that, frankly, the purpose of this question for most people who would raise it is not to say that there therefore is no God, but to say that if there is a God and you consider these questions, you should really consider why you call it God.
Yeah, but
I think that's in the end, that's the main point of the argument.
If I can use a little creative license here, why worship him as such?
Right, exactly. That's
Okay.
I think the primary drive in this particular argument is saying, why do you think that this God is special? Like, have you considered these things about it? If this does truly exist in the way that you think it does, then this is a serious problem that you should consider why. And frankly, I think that in many ways you have said that there are concepts of God that would certainly not be bothered by this, and that's fine. I mean, even just the deistic concept of a creator that either in its creation of everything destroyed itself, or simply created for the purpose that you are speaking in allowing things to be. Certainly, this is not a dilemma for that concept of a God, but that's also not generally a God that people worship.
Yeah, well, I mean, taking that line in the way that you have framed it. Certainly, I can agree with the protest, and let me say I don't believe in worshiping God myself. You know, I certainly admire the creation that I see around me, and in a sense, I suppose there are many definitions of worship, and so in a sense, I suppose that there is a sense of worship there, but it's not groveling at the feet of. It is just saying, "Wow, you know what I see around me is amazing," and it is similar, perhaps, to worshiping a great a writer, because you're just in awe of what they've done.
I will go even a little bit more. I can't think of this word right now. Controversial, that's the word I was looking for, than that, in saying there's certainly ways that you can respect the immense talent and achievement of somebody without respecting in what way it manifested. For example, I think that Adolf Hitler was one of the most impressive leaders in human history. He used it in a terrible way. But man, that guy was talented at getting people to follow him.
We're just going to pull that clip out and
just
we're going to pull that 5 seconds out and just put it on YouTube.
Right, that's going to be we're going to sigh this one up here quick.
But you know, I will also grant that when we began this argument, we kind of assessed the way that most people were looking at this argument, and they were, you know, comparing. You know, most people would juxtapose that God against the God of the Bible, and that's a completely unwinnable argument, because God is.
I agree.
God is shown to be malevolent without even that argument being made. All you have to do is read the stories about him.
Then I think we only have a few more minutes here, and I want to go down one more little path before we let this question rest, and that was the one of knowing everything. You granted that with your last piece, and I wanted to explore that a little bit more.
Sure.
And saying a God that knows everything about the universe can still be, the claim I'm going to make here is can still be held accountable, and I'm going to do that by analogy. Joey, what happens if you take an elementary school and chain up all of the doors and board up all the windows when everybody's inside of it, and you set it on fire?
Well, if I recall correctly, when it happened, all the children died.
Right. And even in a hypothetical situation, you can extrapolate to what is the likely conclusion of that and recognize that that's a bad thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So would not an omnipotent and omniscient creator capable of knowing the consequences of its actions be accountable for those for actually then taking them?
Yes,
instead of just thinking about or considering.
All all creatures that have the ability to reason and have intelligence and free will and make decisions based upon that reason should be held accountable for their decisions and their actions. That includes us and, in my opinion, the creator of us, whether that be our parents or an ultimate creator. However, that does not, even if we find, oh, you made a huge mistake, mister, that does not mean that we therefore conclude that that person is evil.
No,
or
and
malevolent.
I'm not going down that road with saying that person is evil.
Right,
or
malevolent.
I've granted you that
Right.
concept of God is not one I consider malevolent.
Right.
But I can certainly consider it apathetic and not caring about us to a large enough degree to not do such a thing, to not even be concerned with the amount of suffering that it is creating by not simply stopping at the level of a thought experiment.
There are a
because
couple of other
if this God
possibilities.
knows everything,
I will grant you that.
Is the only thing it needs.
I will grant you that, but I won't grant it to you without pointing out that there are other possibilities besides just this creator is malevolent, or excuse me, this creator is apathetic, as you say. There are other possibilities such as maybe this creator is very caring but made a huge mistake.
But that's I'm granting that, or you granted that this God, or I think for the purposes of exploration here, an omniscient one that knows everything about the universe, would be able to, if the time or proper time was dedicated to it, reason out that this is a consequence of this type of creation. That would be information available to that God. And this God could have done the entire creation of the universe and let it all play out to its conclusion in its mind without ever actually creating anything and ever making us go through this physically, just like you just did that in your own mind with that elementary school full of children, and know that that's a terrible thing to actually do.
Well, I think that we would need to get into what it means to say that God knows everything. Are we saying that he knows the future as well?
I think having
that could mean
a
that he
sufficient
knows
set of the
he knows
initial
everything
conditions.
that's going to happen with any decision that he makes. In which case, you would have to conclude that he's perfect. We've already said that there's a possibility that he's not perfect. If he's not perfect,
I'm
that means that
not
he cannot.
going to agree that means he's perfect. I think that
it would
he's
have to be.
capable of knowing
Let
these
me
things
let me
and
let,
chose
let,
not
let me
to.
finish my point. If God can see the outcome of every decision that he makes infinitely to the end, and therefore choose the exact right one, then he is perfect because he will make every decision correctly.
I disagree because we are using can and not does. A God that can and does see out every decision it's going to make to the conclusion is certainly what we would all consider perfect, as long as it's being loving and caring.
All right, Greg.
With
so
these
it
things.
is.
But a
It
God
is
that's capable
possible
of doing it, but is
It
too
is-
hasty.
It is
and
possible
chooses to
without
not?
without doing. It is. I cannot say that our Creator is not one who can see all of the possibilities and just chose not to. Sure, that's possible.
All right. Then that's
right.
really, I think we've effectively established that the Christian God is quite malevolent, that many concepts of God are malevolent or not omnipotent. We've crushed the concept of even considering some of these things as viable options of belief, and
Right.
come down to the conclusion that if you believe in a deistic creator God, then this is not really an issue. I consider this a victory for me as the atheist on this.
I love that we have a show where we both feel like we won every episode. Let me ask you this question. We are running out of time here. We have just a few more minutes left. I'm breaking my own rule here. Is it possible to demonstrate love if there is not suffering?
I don't know if we have time to go into that one, but
see, you are throwing just a bunch of stuff at me at the end of the show that I only have time to answer yes or no to, and you're only winning because I'm not taking the time to explain because I don't have time.
That's not entirely true.
That is wholly true.
No, I said that I'd like to explore that one final rabbit hole, and you granted it to
If
me.
it's
You said
fair,
you're right. There are ways that could
yes,
that certainly
I am an
is true.
extremely nice person and very gracious, but that doesn't mean that that is. I mean, I will grant that wins this argument because there is not time to explore it. But you must grant me that my question: can you express love in a world where there is no suffering? Is a very good question, and one which requires as much time, if not more, than the question you asked me.
I certainly don't deny that. I think it's absolutely worth exploring. In fact, I was talking with Bob in the Cult of Honesty Facebook group about what love is recently, and I think it's an intriguing question to spend more time because that alone is a very nuanced issue that Bob and I are struggling to understand each other.
Okay.
I think, or I'm at
So
least struggling to understand him. So
so
to
blah
then
blah blah
before
blah
we
blah
could
blah
go
blah blah
down
blah blah blah
that,
blah
we
blah.
have to figure out what love is.
That was really rude of me. I'm sorry. Sometimes I go too far. I love you.
I didn't actually hear what you were saying because I
I was
talked
saying
right over
blah 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 over and over again, and now I'm really ashamed of myself. But we need to end the show. Let me just say that I don't, at this point in time, believe that you can express love without suffering, to whatever degree that may be. And I think that if I'm right, that it explains a whole lot about the world that we live in the light of a God or a creator, whatever you want to call him, who is loving and created us and is intelligent and willful. But you know, it's the end of the show.
I can say that it can bring comfort to people who believe in that.
Yeah. Well,
But I don't
I
think that
need
that's
I need
necessarily an absolute conclusion.
I need the
That
comfort.
it just because this God is doing that so that it can express its love to us means that that's a good thing,
No, no,
or
no.
it was even a good thing for
No,
that
no,
God
no.
to
You're
create
going
us.
down
And
the wrong trail here. We're out of time, and I'm going to give you that last word. But we'll see you next time on Clash Course. This show never ends. It's time to close it.